integral coach, as well as an independent non-executive director in several companies. She has strong financial services, mining resources, and original equipment manufacturing industry experience. She's also served as a lecturer and lead faculty for the MBA in Management Consulting at the Global Executive Development Program at GIBS, as well as the faculty in GIBS at Harvard Senior Executive Program in Africa. Her competencies are leadership, management, research, coaching, and equipment manufacturing. Welcome, Dr. Matei.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, Mesha, and good morning to all the participants on this webinar.
Thank you so much. By just breaking the ice with this webinar, and it's also very cold, so I don't literally mean we need to break the ice, but just for us to start the conversation off, what do you enjoy about golf, and how often do you play? Because when I had to prepare myself for this webinar, I also had to obviously had to consult my good friend Google, and I got a lot of information on yourself. And one of the things that I found interesting was that you one of your interests is golf. So by way of just us starting the conversation, what do you enjoy about golf, and how often do you play it?
Well, I think anybody that knows me or searches, I think it's an open secret. You're right that I do love golf. And maybe just a story around how it happened. A few friends of mine, and seeing that this is women on this webinar, a few friends who had partners or husbands or friends or who played golf, essentially decided to stop complaining about, people leaving to play golf. Why don't we set up a women's social golf club? And at the time, I was gifted with golf clubs, and they were gathering dust in the garage until one day I decided, let me just go. Long story short, let me just go. But what I love about golf, and what I found, because I came across this group of women, and we set up a golf club, it soon became a group of supportive women who support one another. Because most of the people that are members of the club are either in corporate, are managers, senior managers, leaders, or business leaders, or those kinds of things in their personal lives. And of course, we are connected by the love of golf. But before you know it, we became sisters. And sisterhood and women supporting women is very critical, especially in not just in this country, issues of gender in organizations. So that's one thing that I really, really love about it. And the other thing, of course, we get to travel together. We get to spend time out in the open, in the fresh air. And as a result of that, even the network, my network extended, because some of the people that I've met who have become friends or have become clients, I would never have met anywhere had it not been for the golf course. So ladies, consider enrolling and learning golf. It's an important thing. You might just find your support group there, like-minded women, but also just having fun and extending your networks.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Matei. And then another question from my side was just, how do you keep yourself grounded?
How I keep myself grounded? I mean, that's a very interesting question. I probably, the best way to answer it is that I take what I do very seriously. Everything that when somebody asks me to do something, in whether personally or professionally, I take that seriously. Commitment is very important to me. And how I keep myself, on the flip side, how I keep myself grounded is that at the same time, I don't take myself that seriously. So I'm also, I also let loose and I'm a goof. So and not taking myself seriously makes me grounded in the sense that, and seriously, and with that, perhaps is the distinction of not taking things personally, because when you are a woman and a leader, you get thrusted in the spotlight, and when you're in the spotlight, you're also going to be criticized. So if you take yourself that seriously, when you criticize, it hurts, like it really stabs. But not taking myself seriously, I suppose, goes with knowing not to take things personally. As long as I always ask myself, when I'm criticized, if I was to be criticized, did I do my best? Was my intentions pure? And I would say, ouch, that hurt, and then kind of move on. And I suppose tied to that, the other thing is, especially in the context of leadership and being a woman leader, is knowing whose feedback to care about, because everybody's always going to have an opinion and say certain things. For me, I've kind of learned to distinguish between the feedback that I care about and from who. And simply, if you're not in the trenches and doing something, then you have no right to criticize me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matsai. Getting to the serious point of the webinar, and also to the topic of the webinar, is that yes, also in my doing some work and also getting some information, and as I also read in your your biography, that you did your PhD obviously on workplace bullying, and your thesis, as I've earlier on said, was called Perceptions of Bullying and Organizational Antecedents in the South African Workplace. But based on your own experience and your own personal experience, as you deal with the topic, and the hand over to you is, to try and answer maybe some of the questions is, what is workplace bullying? And obviously you've also experienced it, because I've also, in doing some research on you, I've also, read that you've also in your own experience have experienced, your workplace experience, you've experienced workplace bullying, and how did you deal with it? And, how did you report, the matter, and what was the outcome if you did report it? But, as you're dealing with the topic, maybe if you can answer some of those questions for us. But at this point, Dr. Matsai, I would like to hand over to you so that you can take the delegates through, the topic of workplace bullying. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much. Let me share my presentation, because I do have a presentation. Let me know once you see it.
Yes, I can see it. You can put it on presentation mode.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right, ladies, thank you so much, and thank you, Meshia. So this is what we're going to be spending our time together on. The aim of the webinar is to help you understand what bullying is and what it is not, and its relationship with other negative acts at work, for example, harassment, discrimination, intimidation, because there's a fine line, as you'll see. As I go along, you'll see that there tend to be almost like an intersection. People tend to confuse the workplace bullying with those other negative acts at work. And it also, after the webinar, I'm hoping that you would have full understanding and be able to recognize bullying behavior and its many faces, and how it shows up, how it manifests. And with that, I'm hoping to provide you with an opportunity to reflect on your own or your leader's behavior, taking the information that I'm going to be sharing with you and laying it over in your own organization, and in terms of, could it be that there is bullying in my organization, and may it be that I'm bullying, or somebody else, my leader, is a bully. Lastly, also in sharing, and I'll share my story as requested by Mesha, to bust the myth about targets and why bullies target them, because often we think of targets of bullying as people that are weak. You'll also notice that I use the word target as opposed to victim, because those two, language in things is also quite important. So just to get right into the topic, so what is workplace bullying? And maybe perhaps the first thing to start is that it's quite complicated. It's a complicated phenomenon, mainly because there's no shared definition globally. There's no shared definition about what constitutes workplace bullying. Unlike sexual harassment, I think the world over, when somebody speaks about sexual harassment, everybody understands what it means. But in the case of workplace bullying, it is not. There's no generally shared definition of what it is and what it is not. And often, as I said, it gets confused with other negative acts at work, such as harassment, discrimination. It gets defined within the context of those other things. And for example, there's a fine line, really is a fine line. When you look at the Sexual Harassment Act in the context of South Africa, bullying is defined as part of harassment. And one of the things, as I got more and more involved and interested and in researching this topic, I found that most of the definitions that are around have been conducted, come from research that has been conducted in Western societies. So one of the things that I believe is that context matter. It's useful to get knowledge and information from Western societies, but I also felt that it's also important for us in the context of South Africa, because societal context matter for us to define, to understand what bullying means for us. And this is part of the study that I did to try to understand what the organizational antecedents of bullying are. In other words, what are those organizational factors that make bullying likely to happen and likely to thrive within the South African context? So most of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you come from findings of that study. So, and this, I thought actually to make it more relevant and to make it more South Africa based. And as you may or may not know, in South Africa, we have a code of good practice, which is now, the last time I checked, it was still before Parliament has not signed into law. It's a good start. It also has its own limitations in the sense that, again, bullying is not elevated to the same level as harassment. It's been defined within what they define as workplace violence. That said, I think it is a good start, and I think things can only go better from here on in terms of dealing and taking this phenomenon seriously in the South African context. One of the things, as I said, that the term bullying, and when I talked about there's no shared definition of the concept. It is often considered as something of a euphemism, and within harassment, discrimination, coercive management, strong management style, aggression, intimidation. What I mean by coercive management or strong management style, it is not uncommon when somebody is being accused of being a bully, and their defense would be, oh, but I'm just doing my job. I'm managing performance. I just have a strong management style. And one of the things that I always say is that I don't want you to confuse bullying with management. As a manager, as a leader, you have every right to, within your scope, within your ambit, within your remit, to manage performance, and strongly so. Sometimes if there's non-performance, you have to manage that. It is in your right. It's one of the functions that a manager should do. However, it becomes bullying in terms of how you do it and the consistency with which you do it. And that's also something I'll refer to, and which is in the next slide, which essentially says, even though there's no shared definition of what bullying is, all the research all over the world essentially agree on these three things, that these are the features that distinguishes bullying and other forms of negative behavior at work. Persistence, in other words, it happens over and over and over again. And escalation, once the bullying starts, often what happens is over time, it deepens. It becomes quite, the bullies' methods and tactics and whatever they do really deepens. So it escalates. And then the third feature is pattern negative acts. In other words, when you look at the period through which bullying has been happening, if you're a target, if you really look back, you begin to identify certain patterns about how the bullying happens and what tactics the bully uses and in what form it actually happens. And what is here, these are examples of some of the nature of bullying, the bullying behavior, belittling, demeaning, and undermining. And all these features, remember the what I spoke about is persistent escalation, which means they happen over time. There's a pattern. You can easily derive and see the pattern. And because all bullies are different, they use, some of the behavior is overt. You can see it, such as emotional outbursts. Somebody that's consistently, almost like has no control over their emotions, but it happens to escalate when it has something to do with specific people. That is the people that they target. Emotional outbursts, anger, shouting. The other one, which is the third one, which is moving goalposts, blaming and not taking responsibility. This is one of some of those that are more covert. And an example of, for example, somebody that moved goalposts and blaming all the time is each time, think about maybe on a Friday afternoon at 3:45, your manager coming to you and saying, here is this, do this, that, and the other. It's very urgent. I want it before you leave, type of thing. And something that is something that cannot be done quickly. And when you do, and you bring it and says, no, but I did not ask that. You did not understand, or you don't listen. And moving goalposts, every time you do something, they move goalposts and they blame you, and as if you're not competent, and kind of shedding you in a bad light. And other behavior related to that is that with all of this that happens, when things don't go wrong, don't go right, when things go wrong, they always blame and not take responsibility. And as a leader, I mean, sometimes one would, an effective leader, one would understand that your role is to provide the direction, strategic direction. You provide direction to the people that report to you, and get out of the way and let them do their work. and be there to support them. If something happens, one of the things that actually leaders do, and I've been in situations where some of my direct reports, something went amiss and it became a big thing, I accepted and took the responsibility as ultimately the leader to say, I take responsibility because that person reports to me, I would have known or this or the other. Whereas with a bully, with the constant moving of the goalpost and blaming, when something goes wrong completely, they take no responsibility and put everything on you. Another form of what I found, and by the way, all these things that I'm sharing with you are things that people said. These are the findings that came from my study. So one of the things that the targets people that I interviewed mentioned was that being refused access to training or promotion activities consistently. Remember, all these things, think about them happening over time, consistently and unfairly, being applied unfairly, because it's one thing for something to happen, but you can see that it's being applied almost like uniformly across everybody else. But when it's not applied uniformly and the policies, whatever that guides, for example, the training and the leave, does not apply to certain specific people, then that's what constitutes bullying. Another form of nature of bullying is being excluded or being marginalized, not being invited to important meetings that are necessary for you to be able to do your job, and being marginalized. And when you don't essentially do achieve that, you become blamed, yet you were marginalized, you were excluded. So in other words, not given the tools that you require. Another example is value of your work reduced. Threats to fire or discipline, not acknowledging the good work done, focusing on mistakes and not on the good work that you do. Many people that I interviewed and that I come across, a typical thing when it comes to threats to fire or discipline, are bullies using legal processes to threaten you, to threaten their targets, to say, if you don't do this, they'll haul you before the disciplinary committees on something that is very, very light and that doesn't warrant that kind of behavior. The other is ganging, it's also called mobbing, ganging against the target. In other words, two people or more than one person ganging and targeting the same person. The key feature here in all of these bullying behavior is that it's repetitive. It's repetitive over a period of at least more than 6 months. So that's what the theories and the literature say. However, the one distinguishing thing about South Africa is that the Code of Good Practice says that for it to be some of these things to happen, they do not have to happen over time. So for bullying to be rendered to have happened, even a one act, a singular act, or something happening on a same occasion would be constituted or be construed as bullying, because the impact might be that big, that large. So these are some of the, when I ask the questions, what are the factors within organizations that make bullying likely or that make bullying to thrive? The one thing that came consistently was power, particularly positional power, and because one of the thread, the patterns were that the bullies tended to have the positional power and influence in the organization, and they use that positional power and influence in an abusive way. So positional power and influence was identified as a factor, an organizational factor. So does perceived power by association. So association by perceived power by association include, because think about it, in every organization, there's the organizational structure, and there's power based on where you sit in the box, higher up in the hierarchy of the organization, and that gives you, authority or power based on where you sit. But perceived power by association might be, for example, I'm a PA to the CEO, and because I'm a peer to the CEO, I have access to other people. So by having access to other people, that gives me some kind of a power. I'll give you an example of the story. One of the targets that I was interviewing told me, said that, she was a manager and her bully was at the same level as her. She too was a manager. But the difference was the person that bullied her, even though they were on the same level, was married to the COO. And because she was married, she was the COO's wife. When they go to the boss barats and things and with partners, she had access to, she was privy to the information, some of the information that otherwise no one else would have had. And by virtue of that association of having access to information that she does not have, and by virtue of being the spouse of the COO, she had power. She wielded some power, because it's almost like every time she was talking, there was some kind of authority behind her. Other examples of organizational factors or antecedents are internal competition, where the targets are so hard, and this usually happens in the sales environment, but also in any environment where the internal competition becomes so unhealthy, because you know that if I make my targets, I'm going to be rewarded. So sometimes then you find people hoarding information, not sharing information, not working in a team way, in a team-like way, because they wanted to they wanted to win. So in internal competition, that's in the type of competition that's unhealthy, where some people want to win and want others to lose. So that's also one of the things that give rise to bullying. And using rewards and benefits as a stick. What I mean here, the example, what the people said was, a manager consistently withholding benefits and allowances in exchange for something. For example, overtime. If you get paid overtime or you do this, but the managers withholding the benefits that are due to you, and if you try to speak up, you get threatened by legal disciplinary procedures. One of the things that was also mentioned, which made bullying to thrive, was that often, because most of the bullies were leaders, people first never reported, were afraid to report the bullying for fear of further intimidation, or when they did, nothing ever happened to people that are bullies that were being reported. As a result of the reporting of bullying and no action being taken against the bullies, it kind of made the bullying behavior more seem acceptable. So, and before you know it, that kind of behavior becomes the organizational culture. And that led to a lot of dissatisfaction and frustration the lack of support from superiors. Also, the lack of support from superiors in instances where people reported led to absolute dissatisfaction and frustration. In some instances, in many instances, people ended up leaving, those that could. There's some of the things is that organizational factors are fear, leading by fear, using the power that I have and saying, you know, and using it in a negative way, in an abusive way, threatening for people to fire people, that causing fear. And the environment of fear enables the bullying to happen, because then people, even when they are being targeted, they are fearful to report it, because they figure I'd rather keep quiet, otherwise I'm going to lose my job. So the other part was just the leadership and organizational culture. In other words, the type of leadership, particularly coercive or autocratic leadership, was found to be also one of the contributors to organizational factors that led to bullying and that made bullying thrive within an organization. As I said there are levels of bullying. The levels of bullying happens at the three levels, and what are some of the examples that I have showed here show that bullying happens at the institutional level, at the organizational level, because sometimes in one of the organizations that I worked for, which shall remain nameless, the biggest bully was the CEO. So when the CEO is the bully, you can imagine, so that kind of behavior essentially draws down and whittles down to all levels of the organization, and it becomes organizational culture. That type of, when the bullying comes from the very top, it becomes institutional, because it kind of becomes institutionalized as the way we do things here, as the way we lead. And the other, it happens at the managerial, the example that I gave, peer-to-peer, and supervisory, where there's power, positional power, and the other happened between peers. I see that there's a question. Is there a question there? How do you tackle bullying from the CEO who's, yes.
She's right. How do you tackle the bullying from the CEO?
That is a difficult one, because especially when the bully is the CEO, because otherwise, and one of the things that makes it difficult is ordinarily one of the things that you could do, the intervention, would be your peers or leaders could try to provide constructive feedback. There are certain, when I do an assignment in an organization, there are specific interventions that I do within organizations. And one of those is the simplest, how to give productive feedback. But then when it's the CEO, it is actually very difficult, because the buck stops with them. The buck stops with him or her. And in the situation where I was, where the big boss was the bully, it was actually horrible. And it was such that nobody could actually tell him or her that she's a bully, and sad to say, nothing really got done about that until the CEO's term came to an end. So this is one of the realities, the sad realities of the situation in South Africa. However, one of the things that could be done about it is have workplace bullying specific policies within the organization. And I'm hoping that once the code of good practice has been passed into law, even though it still guides, there is not so much enforcement, but at least it will provide some kind of organizations to the leaders and HR and all managers essentially to put together policies and procedures to report the bullying. And I think that's one of the ways that you know, in the future we could use to help to address issues, particularly when the bully is the person at the head. I'm not sure, does that answer your question? Just say yay or nay. It may not have answered your question completely, but the problem is, the simple answer is that it's very, very difficult to tackle the bullying from the CEO if outside of, especially if you do not have policies, set policies and procedures to use to follow to report the bullying. Okay, just give me a sense of the person, whether that answered that question or not. So Meshia, you'll be on the watch out for questions also. So what types of bullies? Bullies are different and they use different tactics. So in this next section, we're going to look at the types of bullies and why they target the people that they target. So here are different types of bullies, and not all bullies use the same approaches. However, even though they don't use the same approaches, they share similar traits. And here are them, some of them. There are so many other ones, but these are the ones that are found to be the patterns that came around quite a lot. So what are these traits that they share? Bullies are often very confident and they have very strong personalities, but have little to no empathy for others. So it's always about them, about what they require, what they need, and often is really about for self-promotion, for lack of a better word. Some of them are quite sly. They tend to appear very caring and compassionate on the surface. However, when you turn your back, you will feel enough in your back. And some of the ways that they do that is through spreading of malicious gossip and rumors and essentially ganging and starting going for your character, really, going for your character assassination. They often appear charming, but their charm is deceptive. Most of them are sleek corporate politicians. You know, and why I say that they're charming, sometimes they could be charming when you are in the midst of with other people. They appear charming and appear to be supportive and all that, but behind closed doors, they become different kinds of people. Those are some of the sleek ways, the sleek corporate bullies, because then, you know, what the behavior that they might, you know, how they behave when in the midst of others is very different to when there's no one looking. They also tend to have little to no emotional intelligence. And because they do that, they have very low emotional intelligence. They misconstrue every behavior as motives. If I behave in a certain way, or I ask a question, or I challenge what they say, they take that as a, you know, they misconstrue it as some kind of personal attack. And because once they misconstrue that behavior or my motive for doing that as personal attack, they tend to act on impulse without thinking. I see that we have another question here. Okay, so you've been answered. Thank you. I also think a form of mental armor to diffuse bullying. It'd be great if you could touch on a few defense techniques. Okay, if I don't, just answer that, remind me later on, but I will talk about that. They often, oh yes, some are plain aggressive, impulsive, hot-tempered, coercive, the my way or the highway type. So that's when I talked about the nature of bullying, I talked about those behavior that is overt, meaning the behavior that everybody can see. And so there's the person being impulsive and hot-tempered is an example of that. A lot use positional power to gain dominance and often to hide their insecurities. Because, you know, especially in instances, one of the examples in one of the past organizations where I observed the bullying, where I was bullied myself, one of the bullies was fairly young, which is great, but they got promoted way too quick and too fast, and also through association. So they really use that position, that power to dominate, as to gain dominance and to hide their insecurities, because the person was managing people with a lot more experience than them, people that were a lot more knowledgeable. So, and they felt insecure. And the best way to deal with their own insecurities is that they really use their power to dominate others. Then there's a type that we call passive bullies. Passive bullies rarely are the types, the people that rarely provoke others, but take differing opinions personally and perceive. And when you stand against what they said, they take that very, very personally and perceive that as you declaring on war on them. And typically they tend to be what are described as camp followers, you know, the people that belong in this camp or that camp. So if there's a popular dominant camp now, and you seem to be against them, that camp, they take a stand against you. So passive bullies are also, it's something to watch out for, because they're not, you know, they may not be in your face all the time, but just that time, you know, a few times that you actually have a differing, having an opinion that is different from theirs, especially in a setting such as a meeting, they might tend to be something that you may not have seen before. Then there's the bully victim type. And this research suggests that these are the people who were bullied and turned out to become bullies themselves. And there are various reasons why they can, because I mean, I was bullied, but I hope I did not, I haven't heard that I'm a bully. I was bullied, but I did not turn out to become a bully. But what happens with the bully victim type, those that become bullies, it may be situations of they have been they may have experienced, they become bullies as a result of having had extended exposure to bullying. And because, especially in situations, in organizations where the bullying is not punished, so therefore they begin to perceive the bullying behavior as simply exercising leadership. Because if everybody, a high percentage of the leaders in an organization behave that way, then people tend to believe, oh, okay, maybe this is the best way to get something out of people. This is the way we do things here as far as exercising leadership is. So then they tend to do that and bully themselves. One of the things that research has shown, though, is that ironically, the bullies are neither aware that, most of them, when neither aware that what they are doing is bullying, nor are they aware why they tend to target some of the people that they target because certain bullies tend to target specific people, types of targets, people, and not the others. So there's also a lot of that has been written around that. So now let's look at why bullies choose their targets, characteristics, and look at some of the characteristics of the targets. And this is where I just wanted to highlight this, and that, you know, people that are bullied are not always the weak ones perceived to be victims. So contrary, and maybe this is where I can share my own story before I can't blank the webinar, so I can't blank the slide. I'll speak over it. This is where I can share my own experiences, because some of it actually these characteristics are the ones that apply to me as well. So maybe let me go through them and I'll share my story. So contrary to popular belief, targets are not always weak or victims. They are often highly skilled people, and in many cases, they would be more skilled than the bullies. They would be independent thinkers, people who are not afraid to share their opinion and to express it. And often when they do that, you know, the bullies become threatened. They begin to feel that this person is taking their clout, as it, you know, as it were. And these kinds of targets, people that the bullies target, tend to have better interpersonal skills and a high EQ, emotional intelligence, and are often liked by many people in your department, in the organization, except the bullies. And because they have great interpersonal skills and they have high emotional intelligence, they tend to probably be, very good team players. And when you're a team player, then many people, if they need advice or need opinion, they would go to you. And the bullies don't like this. This is why some of the bullies target people like this. The other characteristic is that they tend to be ethical and honest. In some instances, they, people that are whistleblowers and end up, if it ultimately becomes known that you were a whistleblower, to expose whether fraudulent or procedural or unethical practices, even bullying, they tend up, if it becomes, gets to the open that you're a whistleblower, then you get identified, targeted as a bully. I'm actually working on a specific case right now, an intervention of one of the big JSE listed companies in the financial services, where there's been bullying that has been happening in this province. And, you know, many interventions were done. The person was, there were 360s that were done, and there was always information consistent around how this manager treated the people that reported to her. Sometimes just the language that she used, and so on and so forth. So somebody ultimately became a whistleblower and wrote to the group CEO at the head office. Now, I'm working with the team and the person to try to intervene and to do something about this. But and what had happened in this case is that it became known who the whistleblower was, and the bully targeted the whistleblower. So, but fortunately now, something is being done, and I'm working with them around that. Hopefully, over time, the bully would get to notice her behavior and the impact that they're having on in the organization and in that direct environment. In another example, the bully was this gentleman was the company's biggest performer. All the targets that he met completely. And what tended to happen was that everybody looked away because he was meeting all the targets. But again, in working with them, we came to an understanding, and ultimately the bullies started to, over time, I have to say it took a little bit of time, they began to realize that this was not sustainable. And the EXCO and the CEO began to realize that this was not as sustainable, even though this person was being effective, it was not sustainable because for one of the things that happened, some of the patterns that happened was that he began to lose most of the best talents because people could just not stand. And most of those people that were good talent had options, and they ultimately left. And one of the reasons, the characteristics of targets, the last one, is that, because they know they tend to be independent thinkers, they have no desire to fit in, and not being afraid to voice their opinion, they are often labeled as or perceived as arrogant or weird, and hence they get targeted, singled out and targeted. So the more assertive the target, the more the bully ups the stakes, resulting to performance pressure bullying, threatening disciplinary action, etc. So the big question is, are the organizations you work for or lead bully-proof? And maybe I can stop here and take more questions. Or before I do that, Meshia, what was your question again? To talk about my own experience. What did I do? What happened? And all that.
Yes, and did you report it? There's just two comments in the comment box. The one is from Edith saying that it's so sad to listen to the presentation, that for me it's been 2 years now that I've been struggling from bullying by MM, and it's getting worse year by year. Thank you so much from Nozipo for this information. It is now very clear to me what I went through for a whole year was bullying. Sad to say nothing happened to my senior. This is so empowering. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your comments. It is one of the saddest things, but I have to say now that it feels that South Africa is waking up to this phenomenon, because, for example, like yourselves now, you are having this conversation, this webinar. So it appears that the time has come now where it is we're beginning to talk about bullying. There's somebody that was talking in the background. I don't know. They were not muted.
Sorry, Doctor. It's technical support. Can you please mute your microphone and unmute again? There's an interference coming when you talk and you become inaudible. Thank you.
Okay, so but I can't mute or unmute because I'm on full slide. I don't have those functionalities. Let's see. Oh, okay. Okay, I've muted and unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. There's still that interference. There's a small arrow right by your microphone that's pointing up. If you can just click on that arrow where you mute and unmute yourself, there's a small arrow at the corner that's pointing up.
Yeah. And then the show bar.
No, ma'am. Let me just, sorry. It's gonna help you stop sharing your screen so that you can. Okay. Your microphone at the bottom has a small arrow next to it on the right-hand side, top right corner.
Yeah.
When you click on that arrow,
I have clicked on it.
You will see an option that says leave computer audio. It's the second last option at the bottom.
No, I don't see this leave computer audio, switch to phone audio. Test.
Yes, yes,
Which one?
leave computer.
Leave computer.
All right, and then try to rejoin again. Okay, your audio has been disconnected. Now we're gonna try to reconnect it again. So if you click on your microphone, join audio. There we go.
Okay.
Yes, we can. It seems as though the problem is still persisting.
Okay, I don't know then what to do or what to say. But perhaps when did it start? Did it happen throughout, or in most of, did the delegates hear most of the information?
Marcia, over to you.
Thank you. They had most of the information, Dr. Matei. It's just now that when I read those comments in the chat box, and then after that it just switched over, and then that sound was there. But most of your presentation was covered.
So because it was, I was actually at the end, coming to the end, we could continue here with questions and comments here, and I don't necessarily have to go back to the presentation.
Okay.
Thank
you, Dr. Mutsai. Is there any other questions? If you want to specifically raise a question, you can raise your hand, or please post the questions in the question and answer chat box, and then we'll ask Dr. Mutsai to assist so we can have a conversation. Thank you, colleagues, for that.
And while they do that, perhaps just to share my own experience and why I went into bullying. Like I mean, probably authors, you had stories of authors saying that books write themselves. So getting and studying bullying chose me, because when I was at the previous organization where I was, the bullying happened, and I was not even aware that what was happening was bullying. My line manager and I could not understand what was going on, because I was always performing, meeting my own, meeting the targets and things like that. But what it turned out was that the person thought that I was probably becoming too prominent, even though I was not really, I didn't mind at all what I did, who took the privileges, for lack of a better word, because for me, it was important for my department to actually do and perform and do what it was, what we were hired to do. But the one day, after a particularly really bad day on Friday, I remember driving home and getting home thanks to my friend Google. I Googled whatever, and boom, this thing came out. So just that she logs out and reconnects. Is this still bad?
Yeah, the sound is still there, but
sorry. Can we try logging out and logging back in? I think it's also a network problem.
Okay, all right, I'll do so. Okay, can we try again?
Yes,
better?
it's much better. Yeah, it's much
Okay,
better.
all right. Okay,
you.
great. All
Thank
right. So maybe just to conclude my story, what I was saying when I searched, put whatever I put, I realized that this thing has a name. Please start your story. Okay, I will. This is lovely. This is a nice then. Thanks, Edith. I'll start my story. So I was a senior manager at a very high organization in the financial service, one of the biggest banks in the country. And it turns out that it turns out that my line manager at the time was a bully, and I was not even aware that what I was experiencing was a bully, because the nature of her bullying was that because I naturally had my performance objectives and I always met my objectives. And when I was with her one-on-one, she would give me feedback, but the feedback was always about, almost like she was the type that always reminded me that I was the subordinate, and that she's the boss. And I did not mind that anyway. I did not mind that. But when we were one-on-one, she was quite good, great, and she was always pleased with my work and supportive. But when we were in meetings, in our MENCOs, where other managers were there, she was always criticizing, almost like, but what about this? You didn't do this, you didn't do this, or saying certain things that we had spoken about in a one-on-one, but when she brought them up in meetings, it was always almost like in a condescending way. And sometimes I always say, listen to your intuition, your body. Your body always tells you, gives you information. So she did it the first time, the second time, and the third time, something in my stomach just did not sit well. And I started thinking, but why is this person doing this in this setting, in this way? Whereas when I'm with her in the room, in the office, one-on-one, the feeling is kind of different. So she was the type of the sleek politician, if you like, that I spoke about earlier in the presentation. But long story short, after a particularly bad day, when I got home and I typed what I typed, and all the things that I was experiencing, some of those behaviors came and they had a name, and the name was workplace bullying. My first reaction was, no, I cannot be bullied. Could I be bullied? I cannot be bullied because I'm many things, but I'm not shy to express myself, to stand up for myself. And long story short, it turned out that I was actually bullied. And I started beginning to identify some of the things that were there in front of me that I did not see. One of which was I probably was the third senior manager in as many years that has come. The others had left, and this is usually one of the triggers with the bullies. When start to look at the patterns of one of the giveaway patterns is the high turnover when people leave. And what I then did was I actually had a one-on-one with her. And fortunately, because one of the things I'm trained as is an OD consultant and a coach. So I had a one-on-one where I felt I provided constructive feedback and a constructive conversation. And it, she accepted it, but the behavior did not stop. I escalated it to the head of the department, and we had meetings. She called the two of us. In the meeting, it was cordial, but the behavior just did not stop. long story short, I joined the train. In the end, I joined the train of the leavers and left, which was unfortunate because I really liked that organization, and I was doing some important change work. And I think it speaks to the notion that we all know of, the notion of people leave managers, they don't lead organizations. So I'll go there. Okay, so are there any comments, Mesha, any comments or questions? And something that I may not have covered.
Thanks, Dr. Coach. Mesha has got a power challenge in the area.
Okay.
There is, so I've been asked to just step in on her behalf. So,
Okay.
So the question that you have is from Nosipo, says, how do you help someone like this, a bully? So that's the question.
Yeah. First of all, is there's an exercise that I usually do, and my approach is not just on a one-on-one with the bully, but I also try to work with a team. And I typically use the good old Johari window, because sometimes, especially in instances where the person may not even be aware that what they are doing is bullying. So I would use the exercise with the team around, and I've got a series of self-assessments that I make people do, and the results of it help them to interpret, which may say you're a bully, you're not a bully. And then I also have assessments with the team, help the bully to work with the team in terms of helping him or her access their own blind spots, in terms of, you may be thinking that what you're doing is managing and driving performance, but how you are doing it is perceived in this way and is having an impact in this way. So there are various interventions and ways that you can work with in helping them. I have to caution, though, is that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, because it's behaviorally based, and it also depends on the openness. Ultimately, the success of it depends on the openness of the bully to acknowledge that, you know what, I may not have been aware, or it may not have been my intent, but I'm hurting people. First acknowledging and accepting that this behavior that they are exhibiting is called bullying. It's not with that kind of a person. When you have a bully that is open to acknowledge that what I'm doing is bullying, it becomes a little bit easier. But then you have others who would be like, to hell with you, I'm not a bully. You are just too sensitive, grow up. That with that kind of a bully, it becomes very, very difficult. So the road becomes longer and more difficult, and compared to someone that ultimately, accepts and acknowledges that I am doing this and I'm hurting people, I'm hurting the organization. So I'm not sure if it answers your question, but there are different ways of doing that. It's not just one-on-one, and in some instances also in parallel with all these interventions, I also do one-on-one coaching with the bully.
Thank you very much. There's a comment and a question. Is it fair for your superior to check your WhatsApp status, even though she or he has your number, and the following day ask for you that if you are not feeling comfortable with her, I must say it so that she can transfer me to another department just because of the WhatsApp, which is my private thing? So that's the question. The manager checks the WhatsApp status, and then based on that, starts asking the person question. That's from Ruth. And then there is, most of the time people, it's a comment, who are bullied are women. It happened in our institution with one of our executive directors who happened to be a woman, and it's really painful. And then Nakedi says, how
Okay,
can
there
one,
are too many. Can I
we
see
take one
them?
at a time? Okay. So
Okay,
the first
so
one is WhatsApp. Okay, let's
Yeah.
take the WhatsApp. The other one is a comment.
Ruth, your manager is a freak. The WhatsApp one is I'm not even sure whether you because it's your private time, it's your private so it is, but again, it speaks to some of the things that are said. They use different methods and different some of them, I mean, like, why would people check your WhatsApp status and use it for I don't know for what. Let me read it again. The following day, ask you for that if you are not feeling comfortable with her, I must say it so that she can trust me. Yeah, it is very unfair, Ruth, and I don't know what recourse you might have. And with such kind of a thing, is that why would somebody do that? And have you had the conversation with them? And what is, what is the purpose? Because the other thing I always ask, what is the purpose? What is the intent? Why would somebody do that? But this is just one of those examples of bullies who would use their positional power to do ridiculous things such as those. And unfortunately, the environment allows that kind of thing, in the sense that even when you report that, nothing gets done. So this is why, for me, I approach bullying from the level of the organizations, not just reduce it to a one-on-one and interpersonal thing. And that is why I work with leaders, decision makers, because if you get it right there, then you'd be able to deal with it, to cascade it throughout the organization. So Ruth, I'm very sorry to hear that, but unfortunately, these kinds of things happen, and unfortunately, organizations let these kinds of behavior happen because nothing gets done. But my wish is your organization would actually be willing to address it at the top, at the organizational level. Most of the time, people who are bullied are women. It happened in my institutional with one of who happened to be women. It is painful, Mahomo, but it's also, I've also found in my study, there were both men and women, but I found that there was also equally more women peers, women bullying other women. So there are also other men who do, but unfortunately, when it happens and it's the women, it doesn't serve us, because then it perpetuates the myth that exists about the pull head down syndrome, that we don't support one another. And yes, it is quite painful. Nakedi says, how can you separate bullying from mental ill health, like sadist behavior? Yes, one of the Nakedi, to answer your question, one of the character traits of bullies, they become a little bit, some are narcissistic, some present narcissistic behavior in the sense that it is all about me, it is all about them, and they will crush anything that stand in their way of them not being in the limelight, including taking credit for the work that is not theirs. So it is actually a mental health, ill health. in the sense that being narcissistic tendencies and behavior are actually serious personality problems and some imbalance of sorts, in the sense that it is always about you, nothing else, nothing more, and they will do anything to crush anything that comes in front of them. Shanaz, thank you. Love your work. Thanks. If a target is not able to leave job to financial consider, what survival strategies might you advise? One of the things that I usually do is that there have been cases of recourse. What I usually do is that, first of all, for the target to start recording, I'm big on paper trail because some other times, whether it be emails and you being ridiculed and being through email and copying the whole world. So one of the things that I usually tell the target, especially for your reasons, and Shanaz, I've found, is it Shanaz Majid? I know you, if that's Shanaz Majid. How are you? Oh, yes, I see that's her, yeah. So Shanaz, yes. So what I do, especially I found that most of the targets really endured the bullying for a long time precisely because they cannot afford to lose their job. And half the time, the bully knows that. When they know that, that's also when they up the ante and the bullying becomes even much more intense and painful. In such situations, I first ask the target to document, to do a whole lot of paper trail, essentially, proof of what is going on, and try to find somebody to talk to, whether, if possible, HR. But I've also found in the study that most HR also are not equipped to deal with bullying. And when you use internal disciplinary processes, and because bullying is still not well known, or most organizations, in fact, all organizations, have not defined for themselves what bullying is, and they do not have policy. Therefore, no stated, we do not tolerate this. So I ask people to document all this. In some instances, there are also cases where some people have taken their organizations to the CCMA, but unfortunately, typically, it's usually after dismissal, as unfair dismissal. So there's still their own survival is just documenting it and seeking professional help, if possible, outside of the organization, just to keep your own sanity whilst you're going through and trying to find a long-lasting solution, especially because in situations where the bullies are, it can be quite frustrating, and people really are in a bad space. There are times when it really breaks my heart just to listen to what people are exposed to, and they feel trapped precisely because of financial security. Those horrible jobs are their only source of livelihood. So, but this is my big, hairy, audacious goal, to bring humanity back to the organization. And my wish is that more and more organizations could become aware of this. And I'm working with a colleague to try to do more of this work and to bring solutions to organizations to deal with this. Have I answered all the questions? Oh, I haven't seen this. What do you do if someone is trying by calling you a bully, but they are in a more senior position than you? what do you, look, I mean, in that case, obviously I don't have the context. I can't answer for sure, except to say that bullying happens. There's also, I didn't touch on it, there's also something that's called upward bullying. It is possible for you to bully somebody that you know is senior to you, but it's also the tactics of, sometimes bullies also use tactics of calling others bullies. And so your question about what do you do if someone is trying to, by calling you a bully, but now I'm hoping after today, because you now have a sense of what bullying behavior looks like and how bullying manifests, I'm hoping you can have a conversation in terms of when, if somebody says that you are a bully, and say, why do you say that? Explain to me help me understand why you say I'm a bully. What behavior have I displayed that makes you think that makes you believe that I'm a bully? So I'm hoping the information that has been shared today will give you some kind of a sense to be able to engage then and talk about bullying from a position of understanding, having an understanding of what is bullying, what it is not. The other question, what are the steps one can take as a manager if you suspect that an employee is bullying others? Again, that's one of the things that I said. If you suspect that, you could go to your HR and have a conversation with HR, and if it's really bad or that I'm not sure, but typically most organizations have got internal disciplinary processes or grievance procedures. Perhaps that could be something that you could do. One day, my municipal manager asked me to go and assist the finance department. He heard that I was dedicated and knows how to generate. And after he changed his mind by saying that if I want to go back, first, because he can't give me that position. Okay, Ruth, that's your comment. I suppose my then question would be, what tactic do you think your manager was using? And perhaps I had one slide. I don't have to go into that, but the question I wanted to leave you with was, now that you have this information and you have this understanding, what are you going to do? What are you going to do differently? That's the one question. And the other, I just wanted to get what are your insights from this webinar, and just some kind of feedback. Has that been useful? Do you feel you've equipped a little bit? Coach Pam, I hope I'm not taking over from you from your facilitation, but that's all I had for today, but just to get a sense of how useful, what are the insights, and ultimately what are your big takeaways, and what are you going to do differently? And I'm hoping this has been useful to the delegates in that respect.
Thank you very much, Dr. Coach. And I've just have one comment. Women are taking the knock of being bullied in political organizations. You can't raise freely your dissatisfaction of anything contrary or disagreeing with your principles, because you'll be labeled as anti-force or not in the right camp. And that will result in being recalled from your deployment. Thank you, Dr. Mutsai, for empowering us on this sensitive topic that is a killer to most women out there. Thank you for this webinar, Dr. Mutsai. You have healed me and given me perspective on this tough topic. I love the question about not being financially okay to quit. It is a dilemma of many. Thank you, and be blessed in your work. Highly valued. Thanks, Doctor. Thanks, Gal.
Thank you very much, ladies. I really, really appreciate, and thank you for your questions and your participation. Much appreciated.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to, in closing, we're just on past. If people could just bear with us just a few minutes. One is that the recordings is available. If you registered, you'll be able, and access for the recording. We'll make sure that you get it. And if you're on the program, you'll get it on the Moodle platform as part of the resources there. And we were streaming this live on YouTube. So if you go back to the Zenande YouTube channel, you'll also find the whole webinar there as well. And thank you very much for your attendance and participation. Just one announcement that the next webinar is on the 2nd of September, that we will send out a notification. It's on compassionate leadership, especially this time when we're going through. So, but I would want, just before we leave, just share my screen. I want to share how you contact.
I can leave, right? Or not? Oh, okay. I thought you were doing internal matters.
No. I just wanted people to know to take your details, because this has been very useful, and find ways of, well, we don't have to be here if you have to rush, but it's just that if people need to get hold of you, there's your details, if they can take them down. And thank you very much once again to you and the attendees for making the time and sharing your experiences and knowledge about this sensitive topic. And on that note, let me thank everyone for attendance, and we'll see each other on the 2nd of September. Thank you very much and goodbye. I'm leaving the slide on.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.